This week on the Four Rivers Ag Report, someone is kicking up some dust out there, and we, for one, couldn't be happier.
Also, the Supreme Court scored 9-0 for genetic patents. What does that mean for the future?
And why did the chicken cross the road?
Tell me more.
Well, maybe to pick up some diapers. That and more on the Four Rivers Ag Report. Welcome to the Four Rivers Ag Report. I'm Fred Peralta.
And I'm Monica Becker. After 5 or 6 weeks of sitting and waiting, farmers in our area are out in force trying to beat the anticipated rain. Now, we're still way behind where we should be, and Central Illinois could wrestle the name Land of 1,000 Lakes away from Minnesota right now, but hopefully we'll make up some serious ground getting that corn in. Remember, farmers, be careful out there.
Yeah, but the rest of us can also be careful and considerate of the farmers out in the roads right now. They're not there to make you late for your date, so slow down, Pally. And speaking of dates, Monday, May 13th, 2013 may be one of those days that is remembered many, many years from now. It was a date that a major decision by the Supreme Court was announced, Monsanto v. Bowman. A unanimous decision was rendered in favor of Monsanto's patent defense, basically meaning that the company retains the right to genetic makeup of its seed even after the plant reproduces on its own. Justin Kagan wrote, "If simple copying were protected use, a patent would plummet in value after the first sale of the first item containing the invention. The undiluted patent monopoly, it might be said, would extend not the 20 years the Patent Act promises, but only for one transaction. That would result in less incentive for innovation than Congress wanted." Even with a cracked crystal ball, it's easy to see that genetics, patent law, and fair use will be terms that will be argued not just in the agriculture community, but for all of us for the short and long-term future. And with me today to talk about the Monsanto case is Professor Chase Keeson. He's the professor at the University of Illinois College of Law, and he's the director of the program in intellectual property and technology law. He's also with the Institute of Genomic Biology, and he's written a book on agricultural law and property rights. Professor Keeson, first of all, explain to us what the court decided on Monday and why it matters to us.
Yes, this is a very interesting case. In Bowman versus Monsanto, the U.S. Supreme Court decided unanimously that when a farmer buys genetically modified seed, like Roundup Ready soybeans from Monsanto, the farmer is free to plant that seed, and the farmer is free to harvest whatever seed he obtains from planting that seed. And then the harvested seed can be sold as seed, it can be sold for feed, it can be sold as food, and all that is fine. And Monsanto does not control any of those things.
Right.
Because Monsanto's patent rights have been exhausted with respect to that. In other words, when he bought that seed, Monsanto got paid.
Right.
And so the farmer can do whatever they want with respect to selling the seed, reselling the seed, using it as food or feed is all fine. The only thing that the farmer is not allowed to do is to take the harvested seed and replant that seed to make new seed.
Now that's the real question. It's where does Monsanto's right stop as far as the planting of the propagation of the genome, correct?
Yeah, I mean, essentially what the Supreme Court is saying is that Monsanto invented this technology, and Monsanto developed this technology, and when they get paid for that article, and that's what the farmer paid for. He didn't pay for the technology; he paid for that article. So this is sort of the equivalent of saying, when you buy a book from, some bookstore, you are paying for that copy of the book. You're not paying for the copyright. So you cannot turn around and start making copies of the book in your basement. You can do whatever you want with that book.
Right.
You sell the book, no problem. Use the book as a pillow, no problem. But you can't use that book to start making more copies of the book because you didn't pay for those additional copies. And that's really what the court is saying.
So was this the wrong case to actually argue some of these points as far as genetics, patents? We're dealing with life after all.
I think really, and this is, of course, a unanimous decision by Justice Kagan writing for the whole court. I think in cases like LG versus Quanta, which was a patent exhaustion case, and in another Supreme Court case, JEM, Ag Supply versus Pioneer, those two cases sort of pretty much, to most legal scholars, I think it suggested strongly that the Supreme Court is probably likely to go this way, which is to say, hey, there is patent exhaustion. That's a real doctrine. And indeed, when you pay for some articles, you've paid to use that article. But you're really not paid for the reproduction right. Because otherwise, if you paid for that, then what you're really saying is that you're taking away the patent reward. Because what you're saying is that the patent is really applicable only to one sale. In other words, you can just sell your patented item once and then you're done. Because people can keep on replicating.
Yeah. To use your analogy, if you bought a book, if you copied down the book by longhand and tried to sell it, you would not own the copyright to that copied book.
Right.
Okay.
Or you Xeroxed the whole book and kept on selling copies of it.
Yes. So, okay, where does this decision stand in terms of future decisions? What do you see as potential problems down the road where the court will have to revisit this, and how do you think this verdict will affect that?
Well, I think the court was very careful. Towards the end of the opinion, Justice Kagan makes it very clear. We are not talking about, broadly speaking, a broad right that simply every patent owner can claim, that no replication is possible. And indeed, she quotes from the copyright statute that says, hey, replication may be possible under the U.S. Code, under certain situations where some parts of a program are essential. And she quotes that as an example. And so she says, hey, listen, this is a case-by-case inquiry. It's not applicable across all technologies, across all situations. Suffice to say that, today, a farmer who pays for some genetically modified seed cannot replant that seed. And that's really about it.
Now, one of the questions I see is, what if the farmer had not been negligent in the fact that when he went and bought the seed? What if by cross-pollination some genetic trait gets into a non-Monsanto based seed a field away?
You mean as sort of a pollen drift?
Right, pollen drift.
Yeah.
Is that an act of God sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of answers to that. Well, one is, of course, that if it were pollen drift, then you're really not likely to see a large percentage of your crop actually be, resistant to the herbicide. I mean, maybe a small percentage. So sometimes there have been situations where people have claimed pollen drift, but then when the test is done, 95% of the seeds end up being genetically modified, and it's sort of hard to explain. So that's the first. And the second situation is, these are expensive lawsuits to bring, and so any kind of de minimis sort of pollen drift kind of infringement, I mean, the liability is not worth it.
Yes.
So I think what really ends up happening is, you end up having, you need some fairly egregious set of circumstances, in order to bring these lawsuits. In fact, Justice Kagan, in the opinion, goes on to point out that she says, Vernon Bowman, in his deposition, could not remember any farmer who bought seed from that grain elevator who actually replanted the seed. All the farmers that Mr. Bowman knew had bought the seed from the grain elevator, had used it as food and feed, and not for replanting.
Yeah. So Mr. Bowman, here again, is not the poster boy for future lawsuits. So, Professor, I thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you talking to us today.
Thank you very much, and I enjoyed our conversation very much.
So after weeks of watching numbers, this week farmers are making numbers. Monica, tell me more.
Well, this week's USDA's Illinois crop report really talks about where we were last week, but there was a bunch of activity to report. Corn is reported as 17% planted, 10% higher than last week, but way behind last year's 94%. And in some places, other than the Four Rivers test plot, corn is at 2% emerged, only 72% behind 2012. As far as soil moisture, it's better, but that's relative, isn't it? The statewide topsoil average is 47% adequate and 53% surplus, while locally we are rated at 13% adequate and 87% surplus. Subsoil is rated statewide at 3% short, 62% adequate, and 35% surplus. Locally, we're a bit soggier at 34% adequate and 66% surplus. It'll be interesting to see where the moisture levels are at in Monday's report. Hopefully there won't be a huge amount of rain to tip the scales. Now, there was a bunch of news out of Washington that you might be interested in. The USDA announced that they will conduct sign-up for the Conservation Reserve Program starting May 20th and going through the middle of June. The USDA also announced the continuation of other programs and set the dates for farmers to sign up for them. The programs include the Pollinators Habitat Initiative, the Highly Erodible Land Initiative, and the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. If you're interested, the USDA asks for you to check with your local farm services agent or with the NRCS in your area. And even before they got to the Farm Bill, the Senate passed the Water Resources Development Act. That's the bill designed to help repair and/or replace locks and dams on the Mississippi River and other rivers that have been neglected over the years. Farm groups were lobbying for changes that would include the industry-supported user fee increase, federalization of some projects, and a higher threshold on rehabilitation projects, and it appears that many of those items made it through in the final bill. And this might help keep the farmers awake while working late into the evening. The New York Times reports on a group of biotech hobbyists who are working to create a glow-in-the-dark tree. They hope to use a gene from an algae that glows at night and move it into various plants, including flowers. While all this might sound cool, other groups are hoping to rein in these maverick plant geneticists by appealing to the Department of Agriculture. The opponents fear that uncontrolled genetic research could release plants and animals into the world without proper regard to the effects on the environment and the people. I don't know about you, but it'd be easier to give directions, head out about 2 miles and turn at the 200-watt tree.
Oh, that's a really bright idea, young lady.
I'd say so.
Okay, well, last week we talked to Gary Hoff at the University of Illinois Tax College about talking to your heirs about how you want your estate to be handled. Well, this week we asked him how important was it to take into account tax implications when planning your estate?
Oh, I think it's extremely important to look at it. When you're talking the tax implications, are you talking about estate tax? Are you talking about income tax? Are you talking about both? Probably both. Income tax implications tie into a type of entity you might choose if you want to have it into some type of a situation where you can start transferring during the lifetime or gifting. With the size of some of today's estates, it makes a lot of sense to be looking at that gifting. The income tax, okay, is you want an entity which passes through the income and it's taxed on the individual level, or do you want a corporation where it's taxed on the corporate level?
What are the benefits of either one to certain structures?
One thing that you would look at is what it's going to do with a stepped-up basis. One would be, at what point might you lose control if you're transferring through your lifetime? Another one would be how much of that property is going to remain in your estate. Gifting can be a real issue because with that gift, you need to give some of the cash flow of the operation. Some court cases in the last few years, the courts have looked at it and said, yes, we know that you gave 30% of the farm away during your lifetime, but you received all of the profits from that through the lifetime. And the term they use is dominion and control. It has to be a completed gift, meaning you gave that whole bundle, including the cash, along with the asset. Some parents have a problem with that, okay? Or the estate is such that it doesn't generate enough cash to give them the lifestyle that they choose. I think everyone that has an estate plan needs to go back and look at it in light of today's laws, because those laws have bounced around a lot, from no federal estate exemption to $5 million that we have today. Well, I guess $5.25 million today because it's indexed for inflation. But keeping in mind that if you happen to look at the president's 2014 budget, it has that exemption going back to $1 million. So this estate plan isn't something that you do and put away, okay? It needs to be a living document. It needs to be reviewed at least on an annual basis.
Well, this week on The Map, we're going to talk about the Landsat satellites. And Chris, I'm a child of the space race. I vaguely remember Sputnik. I, of course, remember all the Mercury and Gemini and Apollo programs. But to be honest with you, I haven't paid as much attention about the satellites. You say that it wasn't that long ago that we just started turning the satellites on Earth.
Yeah, and kind of not maybe as an exciting type of satellite as Sputnik or some of the government satellites. Satellites that actually look at what we're doing to the land, specifically the Landsat family of satellites that launched back in 1972.
Now, how long have they been in, since 72? How many Landsat satellites have there been?
They just launched Landsat 8 back in February. Each one was supposed to have maybe a 4 to 6 year lifespan. The early ones did. Landsat 5 is still going. It launched back in '84, I believe.
Yes.
6 never made it into space. It crashed. It had a failure to launch.
It's more of a sat than a Landsat.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And 7 was up for a while back in the 1990s, still is. But luckily 8 was launched here a few months ago and is continuing that 40 plus year history.
Okay, well, what are the Landsat satellites looking at?
A lot of people think satellites are taking pictures. They can do that, but most of these satellites that are looking at how we're changing the Earth, the characteristics of what we're doing, those are actually gathering data, spectral data related to the electromagnetic spectrum. Part of that is the visible light that our eyes can see and that we can make sense, and see what colors things are. But there's a lot of other information out there in the infrared portion of the spectrum, the thermal portions, and so on.
It's seeing the whole spectrum of light,
Exactly.
not just that which we can see. what's in that other spectrum?
Well, like I said, these satellites are accumulating data at these different layers based on the spectrum. So some of the bands are better at looking at water quality, vegetative health, which was very important for agricultural applications. So when you layer those different data sets on top of one another, you can align them in such a way where you can extract very useful information like that, not just see what's on the ground.
Now, how close can we zoom in on these Landsats?
The Landsat data is 30 meter square pixels. So you're not seeing houses, you're not seeing cars, you're basically seeing the overall general features of what's on that piece of land as the satellite passes over it.
Okay, so you're seeing sections, pixel of 30 by 30 meters.
Yep.
And how are we using that data?
Well, sometimes you can take and you can layer, say for example, the layers that look at vegetative health, water, and so on, and you can see that they stand out as a very bright red type of color.
Okay.
To the scientist who's looking at that, that's meaningful, but to the general public, people who are looking to utilize this data, it doesn't mean much. So what you can then do is you can classify that data and give those certain spectral values some meaning. Say it's ag land, or say it's forest, or urban, or so on and so forth.
So you can use these, and you can use old data and compare the two, correct?
Yeah, because the same techniques have been used throughout the entire history, the 40-year history of this program. So you have that ability then to see now for almost a half a century what types of changes we've done to the land.
So you can tell plant health, you can tell water health, can you tell crops?
Different types of crops. The USDA has devised a new methodology now where they can look at, I think it's over 130 different types of crops and extract those from those Landsat data.
So from this big spectrum of light, of energy, we can tell whether or not it's clover or soybeans or corn or what?
Yep, you can tell whatever it is, yeah, exactly.
So how can we use that data?
The USDA uses it to kind of supplement their 5-year ag census, their annual surveys that they do, just to get a better understanding of what the changes and trends of what types of crops we're producing here in the U.S. has been.
So geologists can use this information and trace how long a field's been in a certain type of crop, or how long the water quality of a certain river has changed, that sort of thing?
Exactly, and then you can do something like merging those two together where you can see if, have different types of crops been planted, but then also how has that affected water quality? So you can kind of get those environmental aspects involved as well.
Well, Chris, thank you very much. This was really very interesting, and I know the satellites can't see me out in my patio in my boxers, so that's a good thing.
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Killow with your Inside Extension. It is not too late to sign up for our 4 Seasons Gardening Telenet series. The Gardening Telenet series is your chance to learn from leading lawn and garden experts. There is no charge and anyone is welcome. The last program in the series will be held on May 21st. Don't Drought the Drought will discuss how our landscape will respond to the 2012 drought, as well as growth expectations in 2013 on lawns, newly planted trees, shrubs, and evergreens. This telenet will also discuss what we should be looking for with established trees and what are some of the best management practices for helping our landscape plants recover. The telenet will be conducted in Charleston, Arthur, and Shelbyville. To learn more and to register, go to our website. Give your brain a workout. Sign up for brain training to be held on June 17th and 24th from 1:30 until 3 o'clock p.m. at the Shelbyville Senior Center. Extension educator Sherry Burcham will be teaching this class as part of the Lakeland Community Programs. Register now at lakelandcollege.edu. All ages are welcome. And don't forget, we are now on Twitter. Follow us at UIEXT19 to receive updates on agriculture, master gardeners, family life, 4-H and youth, and more. In addition, we have created a new Twitter account just for ag updates. We'll be tweeting pertinent and timely crop information. Follow us at UIEXT19AG. As always, like us on Facebook and visit our website to stay up to date on our programming. From U of I Extension serving Coles, Cumberland, Moultrie, Douglas, and Shelby counties, this has been Jessica Killow with your Inside Extension.
And finally, what do you get the poultry lover who has everything? How about a chicken diaper? That's right, you heard me. A chicken in a diaper, on purpose. It was invented for people who want to keep chickens as pets and don't want to deal with the random mess that chicken feed and time makes. Julie Baker, a farmer in Claremont, New Hampshire, created the first one to help keep her show chickens' tail feathers clean. Others at the poultry show community saw them, and Julie says the orders just started pouring in. Julie says that she has a woman sewing cooperative in the Dominican Republic make the device, and she sells them on her website in ocean blue, parrot green, or purple rust. Too bad it doesn't come in original recipe or extra crispy.
Don't worry, I'll be sure to keep them away from your show chickens. I know that they're not for eating.
Well, dinner is one of my favorite topics, so
That's it for this week. Work hard, be safe, and enjoy those beautiful sunsets. I'm Monica Becker.
and I'm Fred Peralta, and thanks for watching the Four Rivers Ag Report.